On behalf of Curious Crow, welcome to The Small is Big, Less is More. Curious Crow is a platform created by Urja for discussion and engagement on everything to do with out-of-the-box design and design thinking. We are honored here today to welcome 3 design disruptors in the top polluting industries worldwide: construction, personal wear, and personal transport. Ravi Kalail is a seasoned innovator and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience over business development, supply chain, and strategy. He left his role at Nike Innovation in the US to co-found Plato in India. Inspired by a heartfelt letter from a 10-year-old boy, his mission is to make world-class footwear accessible to every Indian child while promoting sustainability. Through Plato, Ravi aims to provide shoes that support children's growing feet and encourage the joy of play. Pranav Dandekar is an engineer and entrepreneur with expertise in computer science and electric vehicles. As the co-founder and CEO of Wings, an electrical vehicle startup in India, he is leading the way with Robin, an electric microcar designed to tackle pollution and congestion in our cities. Passionate about energy and climate technology, Pranav is dedicated to accelerating the shift towards sustainable energy solutions. Praveen Krasta is an innovator and entrepreneur who has transformed single-use and multi-layered plastic waste into a sustainable building material. What began as a college project evolved into a solution to today's biggest environment problems, with Praveen reimagining how we use waste to create innovative alternatives for the construction and packaging industries. These 3 innovators will be in conversation with Jenny Pinto, founder and design director of Urja. Jenny was one of India's first handmade paper lighting designers, a self-taught handmade paper. She started her design journey in 1998 after 17 years as a TV commercial producer and director in Bombay. She has also just self-published a book for school children on biodiversity and climate change called The Magical Everything. I'd like to welcome Jenny now to the stage.
Good evening, everyone, and it's really nice to see all of you take the Saturday evening off to be here. Just a little bit more about Curious Crow. It's a platform that we started actually in 2019 just to explore our own byline, which is live lightly. And but with these discussions, we hope to continue talking to designers, to innovators, to engineers, to architects about circularity and about materials, and because that's the need of the hour. I think one of the pathways to looking at climate change and dealing with its various aspects is going to be material and design. At Urja, we do explore circularity in our own way, and our materials, which are all natural and organic, are actually mainly from waste, only from waste. And we look at water circularity, but it's just a small step and a small initiative in the larger picture. And we're hoping to have some exciting conversations in the future. For those of you who are coming for the first time, please put yourself on the mailing list. So Einstein is quoted to have said that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. So when it comes to climate change, I often feel that we actually haven't spent enough time thinking about the problem. We say it's about carbon and global warming and erratic weather, and yes, it's about all that. And they're huge problem areas, but at the root of all this, I feel, is human behavior. It's really the elephant in the room. Because human consumption, the huge amounts of natural resources we need to feed our growing needs and our growing population, and how we build and design our lives in a linear fashion, which is, so far, which is just make, use, and throw, has been really a problem that nobody seems to be wanting to talk about or wanting to tackle so far. On the path we are on, reducing consumption seems unlikely to happen in the near future. But to get there, I feel maybe we've got to start embracing small and less and slow. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. 3 innovators whose work I greatly admire, who are going to be talking about just this. And without further ado, let's start with presentations. We'll start with Praveen, and then Ravi, and then Pranav. Okay, welcome Praveen. Come.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. The first slide seems extremely negative. We're going to start with a little bit of sad story, but I'm sure, and I promise you, by the end of the presentation, you guys will be very happy, right? This is the truth of the subject. Today, if we have to build a home, there's no other choice but to tarnish the environment and then build our own. And while we tarnish the environment, we use about 30,000 liters of water to build 1,000 square feet of construction. We then have to use 3 times sand along with 1 ton of cement to be able to build it. Then we have to blast rock. Then we have to make cement at 1,400 degrees. And then we take all this really heavy material and use 18 trucks to transport just material worth 1,000 square feet of construction, and then we have our home. And as we build this home, we also release 62 tons of CO2 into the environment. This is of our engineering. This is the current solution that we have to currently accommodate and build our homes. We fundamentally do this simply because we want to protect ourselves from weather. That's the only reason. And just to do a simple activity like that, this is our current standard. All right, we did it. It still doesn't even work right. In an earthquake, it's going to fall on your head. If you keep it in the sun, it'll absorb so much of heat that even when the sun is down, it'll continue to release it at night. And if you go in the rural spaces, you will find the people sleeping outside their homes because it's just too hot to sleep inside their home. Have you ever seen a species build a home and then sleep outside of it? And then in any emergency, our standard protocol is today to run outside your house. Right? Have you ever seen a species do that? In an emergency, go outside. So we're doing things a little, in an engineering fashion, we're doing it backwards. But the fact is that we live 90% of our lives inside a building. From the time we are born to the time we die, we're all inside a building. We spend 5% of our life in a vehicle. But today, the engineering that has gone into a vehicle is tremendous. Eco-friendly fuels, energy efficiency, serviceability, and all of that stuff. But when we spend 90% of our life inside a building, I don't think so we're paid enough attention. But then, we have good news. Just like limestone became cement, MDF became furniture, we think food packaging is the next construction material. It's time, as Jenny has set up a beautiful forum like this, to rethink the way we are designing things. This is where we have taken single-use plastic, shredded it, cleaned it, under high temperature and pressure, formed it into a board just like MDF or particle board, and taken that and gridded it into a panel and made it into a home. These make modular panels, and this is a typical construction that we have done really in the boondocks in Kanyakumari. The construction begins with a flat floor like this. Panels come one by one, assembled together. Steel members just like this that we have right here holds up the roof, and the roof panels are come together. We put a cement board on the outside and the job is done. From there on, if you shake this floor, there's nothing to break into pieces and fall on you. We allow for the hot air to pass through this panel, and it releases the hot air from the roof. So any hot air buildup in the wall is then pulled out. This is an example of a terrace living space. It was built in 4 days. And the roof is held like this. And it is this resilience that plastic has towards nature. The fact that it does not interact with water, it does not interact with soil, it does not interact with anything in nature today, that today you have divers who have gone and pulled out plastic from the ocean, that's 40, 50 years old, and just dusted it and it's as good as new. It is this resilience right now that makes this a fantastic construction material. The earth itself took this material and stored it very deep into the ground, not wanting us to remove it, but the best way to use this material is to store it. And we believe that storing it inside a wall is one of the best applications for it. This is where we have conducted a test, and this is what we have a patent on, is we have simulated the heat of the sun for 8 hours. This outside temperature has reached 108 degrees. We make the air exit and leave outward, just like the way I just demonstrated. And after 8 hours, we see this inside room temperature has remained at 21 degrees. That means if there's a 108 degree heat just behind this wall, it will not have any influence on this room's temperature. This does not require any electricity or power. And now we'll be able to provide this facility to the most marginalized or to the most premium, as the way you saw a terrace rooftop just now. This material is more cost effective than traditional materials. It's just incredibly faster to build. It uses ridiculously small levels of transportation because everything comes flat packed onto site. No water is needed to construct this structure. People ask me a very popular question of what is the life of the structure? If you would see defining life, life is fundamentally 3 things. You just can't service the home because there are too many cracks and seepage points that is just too expensive to repair. Second, this fungus and mold that has just ruined the internal air quality. And third, you're just bored. It's been 15, 20 years, now we just want to make a change, and that's why you say this home has now lost its life and we need to come up with something new. In all these parameters, this material does not get affected by fungus, termite, and borer because there's nothing in it. Nutrient. In nature, it's completely inert, so it does not interact. It's very easy to make a window, move this wall if you're bored, so you can change the design very easily. And if you want to service a seepage point, you can just enter this wall, fix it, put a sheet back again, and you're back on track. So in all aspects, in a life of a home, this will last longer than regular construction material. And of course, the carbon footprint is, disastrously low. To make sure that this dream of being able to use ocean-bound plastic, which is available in incredibly large quantities, and to be able to make a high-performance construction material just seems like something that's impossible. And that's why we have set up a factory in Hormau where we make this entire thing extremely real. People can come in, walk in, and understand how we are making end products, how we are doing construction, and how this can be deployed in a full-fledged commercial scale. And our intent is to show these factories to interested parties who are architects, contractors, or anybody else who would like to get into this business, wherein we share the technology of how to build a home to anyone who's interested to do it, with the ultimate objective that we have to drive the consumption of single-use and MLP plastic. As soon as we do that, we just don't help in resolving a plastic problem, but we also help in resolving a housing crisis. In this facility, is just 7,000 square feet. We have a chance to make about 300 numbers of homes of about 2 BHK. That's about 150,000 square feet of construction on an annual basis. And welcome all of you to visit this facility anytime in Hormao. The problem has actually become the solution. This fantastic material that has saved us by giving us food, that has been able to, that you can transport food anywhere around the world in the most safest conditions. You know, deep fry a piece of chips, put it inside that, and it'll last for 6 months in the most crispy condition. This ability doesn't exist, and that's why it's solving our problems. However, its ability to not interact with nature has now become a fantastic boon in the construction industry. So we welcome all of you to visit our website. It's ui.limited. You'd like to partner with us, there's a link there. Please say you're interested. We'll get back in touch with you, share the technology with you, and be able to expand this not just in India, but hopefully across the globe. Thanks for all for your patient listening. Thank you. There are a bunch of samples here to give you a live understanding of exactly how the touch and feel of this thing is. This electrical conduits, plumbing lines, solar panels. We have, whenever you guys are ready, this piece will be at the back. We are also inducing condensation in the roof, via which we are producing water in each structure. So the intent is to make off-the-grid living. Here you can see drip irrigation lines in the wall in which you can grow food. There's a semi-done brinjal here. And this, like I mentioned, is the patent that we have. Hot air will rise, go into the roof, and exit out this way. That's it. Thank you very much.
So while that is getting removed, my name is Ravi Kalail. I'm the co-founder of a footwear startup called Plato. You probably have never heard of it, but hopefully in the next few years we're going to be there with the dream of making Nike in India. Actually, that's what we kind of started off with. The name Plato itself means play happy. We just conjured it up. Lato in Latin means happy, and it's actually a company that is inspired by a child studying in Kumaran school who came to me when I was at Nike asking for a discount on a shoe. And that got me thinking there are thousands of kids in India who don't have access to great footwear. Could we make it? For about a decade I worked on it, and I couldn't convince Nike to make product for India for Indian children because it just didn't fit into their pricing structure. So the only way to do it was to kind of leave Nike, come back to India after working 18 years there. So that's how Plato got started. We started this with this mission to enable every Indian child to discover the joy of play, because footwear is such an integral part of play, and play is something that makes every child happy. So if it is that easy, why can't we do it with great footwear is a question that we asked ourselves. Just to give you a summary of what we are trying to do here, we are trying to make world-class all-day, everyday footwear. When I say world-class, we are trying to make a product that uses the best materials, it uses the best engineering, and the best design that we can ever put on the feet of a child. All day, every day is the world that we all live in. We want one footwear to kind of use for everything. You want to play in it, you want to go out into the mall, you want to go out into the office with it. And what we call a category called multiplay, we're just creating that in India. And that's what we all live in. But unfortunately, the industry has gone into running basketball, cricket, and football and all stuff. And we're trying to kind of go the other way around and make one shoe which will serve the needs of most people. And for the Indian feet, it is important to realize that our body structure is different from a Western body structure. Unfortunately, every footwear that is sold in India is based off a Western foot type. That is why when you put your foot into a Western shoe, it feels tight. Within 20 minutes, you want to remove it and want to walk barefoot. So the amount of work that we have done in terms of understanding the Indian foot structure, which is very data-driven. We scanned the feet of 800 people around the country, took the data, went to Italy, made the tooling basis that. And so if you put on the shoe, you will realize that it's much more comfortable than any Nike or an Adidas. Not for any other thing, it's just that it fits the Indian feet better. What we're trying to do is make high performance but accessible shoes. In India, pricing is such an important lever that people kind of use to buy product. And most Western companies don't understand it. That is why Nike, even after 15 years in India, it's still under 1,000 crores in a market as big as this. And we're trying to see if we can bring India-inspired design into footwear, because all the designs that you see are all knockoffs of Western shoes. So can we bring some India inspiration? If you look at clothes, we find a lot of color in Indian attire, but in shoes, it's always brown, black, and blue. So we're trying to change some of those. But in the process of doing this, we wanted to see if we could do it sustainably. No one's paying us for making footwear sustainable. But the thing is that it just felt good to kind of do that right up front. And since we're creating it on a whiteboard, we said, let's do this in the right way. We got nominated for the Edison Awards in 22 for the sustainability design. And the other thing is that we make everything in India. So not one piece, 1 gram is sourced out from anywhere outside India. So we're trying to make it locally, sell it locally, and transport everything within 3 to 4 days of where the consumer is. We've sold 500,000. We got 500,000 consumers in the last 3 years. So it's not something that you would probably have heard of, but we've been kind of under the table for a long time to kind of get this product for market fit. We make the best school shoes in India. Why I say is best, because we are the only company that gives a 1-year warranty on a school shoe. And we get only 0.3% returns, which no other company has ever been able to do. And got a lot of thought that's gone into footwear design. So we've taken that idea and now we've kind of made other product with it. So we sell a lot on Amazon and our own store. So we've sold about 130,000 pairs of non-school footwear too. In fact, the idea of access is important to us. We just closed the biggest order of 150,000 pairs with a non-profit in out of Bombay to serve government school kids who are girls to enable play in their lives. So that is important to us. Sustainability is important to us, and that's what we're trying to build out in India. So it's a company kind of driven by purpose and impact as we build something which is also meaningful from a financial point of view. So why is Plato different? And I'll just take you through a few slides. One, we are the only company, and I can say that safely, which uses design and innovation as a superpower in amongst the Indian footwear startups. I spent 10 years in Nike, heading ideation for Nike globally. We're trying to build footwear, rethink footwear manufacturing 10 years out. What technology can we bring? What sustainability angle can we bring into this? My co-founder Pawan worked at Apple and Adidas. He was the head of retail for Apple for 8 years, built it into a $2 billion business before he came and joined me. Our head of design, Aaron Cooper, was in Nike for 30 years. He was the designer for LeBron James and Serena Williams and big names like that. So we've got a bunch of people who are looking at design and innovation in a category where you're making $20 shoes actually. So no one's really thought that way before. So this is the shoe that we sell. Just to give you a sense of what we have done, as I said, it's a multi-play shoe, one shoe for all play. That itself has a sustainability angle to it because you don't have to buy 4 pairs to kind of live your life. In order to give the maximum benefit to the user, for instance, it's been designed for forward and lateral movement. That is what kids and most people who use a multi-play shoe use. They want to run forward and kids are kind of moving sideways. So a lot of inspiration has been taken from tennis as a sport because that's one sport where you see lateral movement and forward movement. If you look at the materials we have used, there is only 2 materials that we kind of intentionally constrained ourselves to. The upper is made of polyester and the bottom is made of polyurethane. The reason why we put that constraint is because in footwear, and you'll see that in the next few slides, the problem with trying to make anything sustainable in footwear is the number of components that go into it. Many times there are like 10 different materials on it which are all stuck together, stitched together, and you can never get it out. It's just not economical to separate it. That's why it goes into landfill. Now, globally, 23 billion pairs of footwear are made every year, and 22 billion go into landfill. There's only 1 million which gets recycled, and it is because of this problem, saying that too many materials are getting added into the footwear. The consumer has no idea what it is. People just add material and there's no cost for it from a company perspective. So the reason why I picked polyurethane is because of this idea of durability. Polyurethane used to be a material used in footwear, but over a period of time it's kind of moved to another material called EVA, ethylene vinyl acetate, which is lighter than polyurethane, but it bottoms out after 300-400 kilometers of walk. So the feel completely goes away. Whereas polyurethane, we've tested it. A person walked 21,000 kilometers in her shoes in the last 3 years in India for a blood donation drive. And when we tested the shoes after that, it had a 1% performance degradation. After, every 5,000 kilometers we would test it. So that's why we said, let's give a foam that lasts, that long, 3,000 kilometers. And that's how much a child walks in a school shoe. So that's why we picked that up. 2,500 kilometers, they take about 15,000 steps, and you just total it up over 250 days, you'll realize how much they walk. And that's what we've been trying to educate parents about, saying that, hey, don't, stop spending on footwear, because the effect of that is going to be felt 10 years from then, because you'll change the way your child walks, and then you'll feel a pain in the hip and on the knees, etc. So spend that extra 500 rupees, get a better shoe for the child, because they will not complain. They'll just kind of walk with whatever you give them. And the process of designing it, and I'll spend some more time on how we have designed it. We've created a 6.5 kg carbon shoe. Normal shoes are around 12. So it's just through design and material selection we've come to it. Now, are we the best? We're not. Can we get closer to zero? We can. But that shouldn't prevent us from making progress in terms of doing that. To get to a zero carbon shoe, the amount of, the costs of a zero carbon shoe are like $250, because we don't have the capability to kind of innovate on materials. We're kind of using whatever we know to kind of get the lowest carbon footprint we can. From our, we started this company with this two basic things. One is, hey, we've got to make the shoe as durable as possible, because a shoe that is not bought is the most sustainable shoe. So in a school shoe, for example, kids wear out 2 pairs of shoes in a year, because you buy a cheap shoe and it breaks. We are saying that, hey, just buy one. And because of that, the second purchase is completely avoided. And that is really sustainability from our perspective. Second one is that a shoe with a 6.5 kg of carbon in the US costs $120, which is Allbirds. For us, we've been able to create the 6.5 kg at a $20 price point. And we believe that if sustainability has to move the needle, it has to be at lowest price points, because that's where the maximum volume is. We want every Hawaii chappal to be sustainable. And this is one way we're kind of demonstrating how we can kind of get closer to that. Are we the best? We're not, but at least it's moving in the right direction. So how do we design for sustainability? everything that we talk about, I talked about the number of materials we use. We've restricted it to 2. It has been designed in such a way that normally footwear has between 20 to 40 components. We have designed it to limit it to only about 10. So that is one. It helps us with process, the number of people working on the factories, etc. And then even in terms of engineering, I'll just go one click down. You'll find how we've kind of thought through, 200 years of footwear making into a completely different process. So how have we innovated for durability? And this is where we looked outside for inspiration. For example, this is a shoe that we sell to school kids. The requirement was, how do you make it almost child-proof for 1 year durability? And children tear everything, So we said, where can we find the most durable material that can be sustainable? So we looked at polyester and we found that in a Samsonite bag. If you look at backpacks, they never tear, isn't it? You can't put a hole through that. So we went and selected polyester canvas as a material which is already available in recycled options, from PET bottles and all stuff. But then it doesn't have a right feel at the bottom, so we kind of lined it up with non-woven materials. And where did we find that? We found that in car headliners. So even that is recycled from PET bottles. Now that material, the canvas actually comes from an automotive supplier. It doesn't come from a textile supplier for a footwear use. So we work with one of the most innovative companies out of Surat to make that. So as a result of that, we have a 0.3 failure rate in our footwear. In fact, I haven't seen a shoe that has come back in the last 1 year where someone's been able to tear the upper. The other thing we have done is we've taken adhesives completely out of this shoe. So it is bonded using chemistry. So the only way to make that shoe come apart is to tear it. So that is why we're fairly confident that we can give it to a child and still give a 1 year warranty. In fact, we are now hearing from parents that if the foot doesn't grow, the shoe lasts 2 to 3 years. While not good from a revenue point of view, it's absolutely the right thing from a sustainability perspective. So this is what I was talking about. For 200 years, ever since footwear was made, this is how patterns were cut when the shoe was made. And that led to a 30% waste. Nike, the waste numbers when we tallied was $3 billion. It was all going to landfill straight from factories, and they couldn't do anything out of it. What we did was completely change the way the pattern is made. That has helped reduce 15% waste. So we've gone and thought through everything that we have done on footwear to make these small changes that is helping us. Now, from a cost point of view, we are able to price our product at, say, 1,500 or 1,800 rupees. And from a sustainability point of view, it has a better impact, because what primarily drives sustainability is the weight of material that you use on the product. 60 to 70% of carbon impact is what materials you put, how much do you put on it. So here is another one which I talked about. We cut down the number of components. So when we started off, we wanted to make it with just 3 pieces actually. We almost did it, but then it doesn't give the durability that a child wants for 1 year. So we had to kind of add back a lot of things into it. We're taking it to the next level. Can we enable circularity, which is the holy grail in footwear? Now we're working with Aditya Birla to take post-consumer waste. In fact, the shoe I'm wearing is made from post-consumer waste of uniforms that we gave to Aditya Birla. And the bottom is our own shoes that we recycled. The reason why we picked polyurethane is because it is one of the most used chemistries in the world, and if ever there is going to be a sustainability solution coming out, it will be in polyurethane first. We have found one guy in Delhi who's able to actually take our old shoes, cut it and put it into a reactor and give us polyurethane back. And at the same cost as virgin material, which is even better. Because every time we have tried to make a product with recycled material, it costs more and the consumer won't pay for it. So that is one realization we've had. So if you want to sell any product, it's got to be at the same price that virgin materials cost. So that is Plato for you. If you have any questions after this, I'm happy to kind of answer that at the end of it. Yeah.
Hi all. I'm Pranav Dandekar. Jenny, thanks for putting together this awesome event. It's at the intersection of two fields that I'm sort of very close to my heart, both design and sustainability. And so, and these were sort of very powerful presentations. So thanks for putting this event together. Thank you all for coming in. My name is Pranav Dandekar. I'm co-founder CEO of Wings. At Wings, we are on a mission to help solve the traffic congestion problem by reimagining personal mobility of the future. And so if you think about personal mobility, so that's like individuals, most times people are moving every day from home to work. And increasingly they're using cars, right? Let's sort of zoom out and look at sort of the history of personal mobility in India. Right? Back in the 60s and 70s, Indian streets were buzzing with bicycles. Right? Bicycle was by far the most dominant mode of personal mobility. Over time, as people became richer, the bicycles were traded in for scooters and motorbikes. And increasingly, people are moving from scooters and motorbikes to cars. The cars are themselves becoming bigger, but the roads can't keep getting wider. And so you have this traffic congestion problem that is getting worse by every passing day. So if you think about cars and SUVs, they're really very selfish in the sense that they're great for those inside them, but are terrible for everyone outside. Right? So they make our cities less livable, less walkable, less pleasant. And so we stepped back and said, well, what would be the ideal city ride? What would be the ideal way of moving people from home to work or running errands or moving about town? And we think an ideal city ride should combine the efficiency and mobility of a two-wheeler with the safety and comfort of a small car. Right? It should care both about the people inside and the people outside. And so that led to the form factor that we've been working on for the last 6 years. And so, ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Robin. So it's a two-seater microcar with the length and width of a motorbike. So let's quickly go over sort of what the specs look like. Right? So Robin is a four-wheeler, but it's not a passenger car. It's considered what's called a quadricycle, an L7 quadricycle. So it requires a driver license and registration. The most important sort of spec is that it has the length and width of a motorbike. And that's a constraint we imposed upon ourselves. So it's a constraint that ensures that Robin can go where a bike can go, and it can park where a bike can park, which we think was very important because the world has seen lots of small cars, mini cars, city cars, two-seater cars, coupes, right? That there is a history of all of those vehicles in automotive. But we said that's not enough, right? It has to fit the length and width of a motorbike. And so these dimensions are very similar to what a large motorbike in India would be like a Royal Enfield, Himalayan or equivalent. Right? And to do that, you have to make a tandem two-seater. Right? So side-by-side two seats are not good enough. You have to have front and back two seats. And then because it's meant for city driving, a top speed of 60 kilometers per hour and a range of 90 kilometers per charge is more than enough. Right? And so we designed this over a period of 5 years while extensively talking to customers all around the country. And we've talked to hundreds of them and asked them about their everyday commutes, their misery of driving a two-wheeler, their challenges of finding parking for their cars. And we realized that Robin is really good for people who value safety and comfort. And this includes working women, young families, retirees. But really, I mean, who doesn't like safety and comfort? So Robin really is for all of us. Right? And so 5 months ago, we got Robin certified, right? And which makes this the only roadworthy microcar in India today. And then we launched the website and started taking pre-orders and doing test drives, including here in Bangalore. And we've just been blown away by the response. I mean, for 5 years when we were working on this, even though we were talking to customers, we were worried whether enough people would see the promise of what we were building. And we've just been completely blown away by the response just in a short span of 5 months. Our social media content has gotten 16 million plus views. We've had 135,000 plus visitors on the website, 180,000 plus likes, shares, reposts, 4,500 plus test drive requests across 40 plus cities in the country, right? Where people are like, I mean, just this morning I had an elderly lady from Ernakulam who took a train, came to Bangalore at 5 a.m., messaged me, came for a test drive, spent a couple hours with us, and took the train back at 4 p.m., right? So it's such a gratifying, such a humbling experience to build something that people feel so strongly about. I mean, people from Yelahankar, coming over for, spending 1.5 hours in traffic just for a 20-minute test drive, right? And of course, ultimately the proof is in the pudding, and so we've gotten 1,100 plus pre-orders where people are spending, paying 5,000 rupees each to get in on a wait list, right? And so we're at a point where we're now setting up production. We're planning to start deliveries middle of next year. And it's been extremely gratifying to see the kind of response we've seen so far. And so I can't wait to see thousands of Robins on the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav, Ravi, and Praveen. I'm going to call all of you back on stage to let's just have a discussion. I grew up in a world that I sort of transited from the old to the new. And exactly at the time that India liberalized, I was in advertising, and I was, we were all excited about the country liberalizing and the economy liberalizing and all these foreign things coming in. And we sort of looked at, Indian solutions that we grew up with and thought they were not good enough. And what excites me is that actually we're coming back to distinctly Indian solutions, thinking about distinctly Indian problems, which is housing and affordability and, overcrowded roads. And I think that's actually a very exciting, especially as someone as a designer, that's very exciting for me to see. Someone, like I said, who straddled both. And all three of them, I think, had, I think as I started started talking about what Einstein said, I think the problem has been thought about deeply, and that's nice, because the solutions then, are specific to, and I think India has very, very distinctly different problems, and the solutions have to come locally. Ravi, I wanted to start with you. You talked about, can you talk a little bit more about material, in the sense, in the last few years, suddenly all over the world, plastic and polyester is like the bad guy. But, I think people are slowly beginning to realize that single materials can be handled. It's the composites and the putting together of, can you speak a little bit more about that? I think that's an interesting subject that not everybody thinks about.
Yeah, so as I said, the problem with sustainability in footwear is the composite nature of how the footwear is constructed. So during my time at Nike, we kind of did a lot of work on how can you minimize it. So we brought it down to one. In fact, with thermoplastic urethane, you can create shoes. One, it's expensive. Second is that it doesn't have the durability that you want in a footwear. So that's why it never made it into commercial use. I think the next best thing we tried was to make it with two materials. And, you know, the initial go-to solution is, hey, can we get natural material? You know, you can find cotton and all stuff. But in a country like India, where drinking water is of such severe shortage, we said it's not the right thing for us to go and make shoes with, cotton canvas when drinking water is not there. Because, each T-shirt, for instance, if you look at it, it requires some 500 gallons of water to make. So I just felt that, let's see what we can find from, even if it is petroleum based, if it provides the durability and it's as much as anything else that you can get, let's start with that.
It's not just about durability. I think keeping the number of materials down is easier to become circular, because
Correct,
you can, because my favorite example is actually the fact that our human bodies are just 21 elements on the periodic table, whereas an iPhone is 85. And it's a composite of 85, which is probably why it's so easy for the planet to, we can disintegrate, but an iPhone can't. It's very expensive, or it's very, so then keeping the number of materials down is actually the key, because even Praveen's material there is plastic. But, so do you want to Praveen, talk about what happens at the end of life of because to a certain extent it is a composite. There is more than two materials.
Something that we do today in our design is that we're expecting our
Pranav. Since we are on end of life, actually, I think one of the big problems that we face today is batteries, and with the world racing towards towards alternate energy and solar, we have a huge problem in landfills with recycling batteries, and batteries don't seem to last longer than 4 or 5 years. Those are the, so what, how are you all innovating towards, for that aspect of the EV? Yes. Thank you. That's actually heartening to know. But I want to actually come back to all three of you. If you can talk a little bit about what was your inspiration behind, because all of you are sort of off the beaten track. It's not all three of the materials that you, the products that you make. And in a world that's actually going bigger and into legacy and into, I mean, if you, yeah, our Bangalore, I mean, any city in India now, I mean, the cars are bigger, the homes are bigger, everything. So, let's talk about small and less, which is what we started talking about. I mean, all three of you, I mean, Ravi, you can start.
So, my main motivation, to be honest, was to come and make that shoe for an Indian child. But personally, having worked at Nike and I was part of the sustainability group there, and it was something that kind of grew on me till 2018 when floods hit Kerala, and I realized my 85-year-old mother, 2 times she had to be evacuated in the next 2 years out of her own home on a boat. And she came and said that, hey, should I move out of this? In fact, that was the closest someone in my family had come to being a climate refugee of sorts. Then said, hey, this is something that, in some sense was personal. And that's when I said, if I'm going to make something, let's make it sustainable, even if it is not the best in terms of solutions. Let's kind of do it to the extent that we can and create some awareness around this. Today, one of the things that we are working with is every school, we put a big box out there so that you can throw in old shoes. We collect it back. We don't have a solution to recycle it completely, but we work with Gunj to repurpose it for a second use. At least it's better than sending it to a landfill. So we're kind of thinking of solutions, and I think there is growing awareness that we're kind of damaging the planet. And if we can put that into children in schools, I think probably that is our legacy in some sense.
To inculcate that in school children is actually important, to see the importance of, Yeah, I think for me right now, I strongly feel that everything starts with education. Because an 8-year-old child, I mean, she mentioned that I'd just done a book on biodiversity and climate change, and I wrote it for children 12 plus. But the children who've actually completely got it and have been the most responsive to it have been the 8 and 9-year-olds, and I think that's probably where really important ideas I feel get seeded. So I think this whole thing of being able to put your used shoes and in a bin and then being able to, knowing that they're going to be recycled is a good habit. Praveen?
We actually started with this is to make highly engineered products. That the eco-friendliness is almost a byproduct of the entire activity.
Well, I mean, so just as a bit of problem is obvious. You don't have to make a 50 slide pitch deck to motivate the problem. And I was broadly exploring sort of the clean tech space. And struck us both sort of as we were batting about ideas was that so consider the following thought experiment, right? If overnight I turn every vehicle on the road into an electric vehicle, then tomorrow you would have no vehicular pollution, right? So you would fix the vehicular pollution problem overnight. It would do nothing for the congestion problem. Tomorrow your congestion is exactly as bad as it was today. Congestion is not driven by whether the vehicle is IC engine or electric. It's driven by the size of the vehicle, right? So we said, well, let's not, I mean, the fact that this vehicle, this micro car is electric is incidental. That's not why you should buy it. You should buy it because it makes it possible for you to ride in the safety and comfort of a small vehicle that can zip through traffic in a way that your big car cannot, right? So very few people seem to be working on the congestion problem. The only solution we seem to have is of public transport, which is clearly very essential, and we must have high quality sort of public transport, except that it's taking a long time to happen. And my worry, sort of, deep worry here is that as people become richer, they wouldn't want to use public transport. Fundamentally, public transport involves a certain amount of inconvenience. You have to walk the last mile, you have to get there, if the train is at 8:11, you have to be there at 8:10, right? There are things that restrict you when you're using, public transport restrict you in certain ways. And so we said, well, if you're going to use personal transport, can we make it so people don't have to use their cars everywhere, right? Can we sort of give them the best of both worlds, right? That was the motive.
But public transport people not wanting to adopt public transport seems to be a peculiarly Indian problem. I mean, if you look at the West, it's being adopted more and more, especially Europe, especially say Singapore. What do you think the reason is? I mean, it actually comes down to behavior, which we.
I think it's sort of 2 or 3 different things. One is sort of public policy. Well, first is infrastructure. Like, do you have available public transport, right? 2 is sort of public policy, where do you incentivize people to use it? Is it cheap enough? Is it available often enough, and so forth? Does it reach where people need to go? And the third part, which is sort of the deepest part of this, is culture. Like, what do we value as culture, right? And so, for example, I mean, US is generally sort of a poster child for conspicuous consumption. But even in the US, if you look at New York versus Texas, right? In New York, it's considered completely normal for people to not know how to drive, right? New Yorkers were very proud to say, I've never driven a car, I don't care, I'm very happy riding a subway, right? And in Texas, you couldn't go from your home to the nearest grocery store without having to buy a F-150 and then driving 10 miles, right? It's culture. The culture in New York is very different from culture in Texas. Similarly, the culture in Singapore or Tokyo is very different. And so first we need to create the infrastructure, and then we need to create the culture. But you can't expect people to undertake the inconvenience if they have the money to buy convenience. Historically, we rode bicycles because we couldn't afford a scooter, right? The problem today is people have the money to buy a Toyota Fortuner or a Tata Nexon or whatever else.
No, so which actually, it's a good point to talk about public policy. I think with all the 3 materials and the 3 products we're looking at today, beneath it all is also, it's important. I mean, ESG actually, the governance and the policy. I mean, how should that change to support this change in behavior, the change in looking at, in how we produce, how the cost structures, the taxation, I mean, all that comes under policy. So, I mean, how do all of you, how much to, does that
Yeah, personally, I feel that change of this scale will not happen without government interference in it. It has to be driven by regulation or public policy. For example, if you look at UPI in India, it would never have happened without the government building the backbone. You see the difference between India and the US. That is the difference. In fact, their financial infrastructure is way behind India in terms of how easy it is and how it's connected and all stuff. And I see the same thing with, for example, EV, and you may be able to add more to it unless the government kind of incentivizes or puts in regulation on, the mileage on vehicles and all stuff. People are not going to go there because all corporations, by its very nature, they are driven by greed. So if they're not here to kind of make the planet a better place or anything like that. In fact, so if you want to get them to do something for the planet, it has to be driven by the government. And the first signs of that, at least in our industry, is happening in Europe. France has passed laws on, product take back in apparel, for instance. It exists in cell phones and that kind of stuff, but the moment you do that, apparel companies will start thinking of sustainability. And then they'll be forced to kind of do it. And then, only then will you see, change in that industry.
Is that EPR or it's just, extended producer responsibility, the taking back of in France?
Yeah, part of it is that. In fact, they've not kind of finalized the rules, but at least in this fashion industry and footwear, what we realized is most of this change happens in Europe first, and then you will see that the US kind of follows, and then the rest of the world follows. So my own take is that unless the government interferes in it, it will not happen.
In our experience, we would prefer not to depend on government policies. Since, let's take an example of reduce, reuse, and recycle. This is a campaign that started off by a senator in Wisconsin in the 1960s, 1970s, and it's about 9%. So that means still 91% of yours and my driveway still goes to the ocean, right? And reuse, you and I are not going to take our shampoo bottle and go into the retail shop and fill it, right? That's not happening. Since the last 50 odd years, we all have to accept that this is a failed campaign. Continuing reduce, reuse, and recycle is not the way forward. It's time for us in today's age of AI, in today's age of blockchain, for us to not depend on the government, because they're just too slow, they don't have the intent, and it has been proven over this duration of time that it's not worked. Let us say they came up with EPR. Today we are deeply involved with EPR policies. Today every corporate gives out their sustainability report based on weighbridge slips. So if I have thrown 1,000 tons of plastic waste, being, let's say, a food producer, I have to collect that 1,000 tons. That's the EPR policy, and which means I have to just pay for it. I'm not going to go and do it. I'm getting a middleman to sign off a check. But what is that middleman giving me as proof of recycling? He's giving a weighbridge slip. So he's giving a bunch of weighbridge slips that reach the finance department, and he'll sign off a check and he'll say, I'm EPR compliant. And right now, then the sustainability report given by all these companies look like as if Mother Teresa was making it. Right? But the fact of the situation is that nothing is really happening. But let's say EPR is a great example of policy coming from the top and then being globally implemented. But have you seen plastic reduction? Have you seen the plastic on the side of our streets reducing? But if you open ITC, Nestle, Coke, and all the big guys, all their sustainability reports say they're over-compliant. And that is the fact. So this is how far I would think, at least in our line of business, I wouldn't like to comment about other areas of work, but in this area of waste management and things like that, it's time for us to take charge. It's time for us to start doing things in a way that businesses are made, materials are collected, and we start doing things in small circuits and make those as examples and start replicating them. And that we don't need the government for.
Who's we?
It is us. A show like, an event like this is a start point. And yes, it is. And I think it's time for us to start changing this narrative. It's time for us to start talking about how, example in our case, waste is managed in small circuits. Today we are trying to make everything centralized, and that's our biggest issue. And as soon as we take chips packets and move it a large distance, it's just unviable to do so. It's an example of how things have to be managed in small pockets and then be replicated. We're trying to boil the ocean here. It's such a big issue, and we're trying to solve everything.
Pranav, before I get to you, we actually have a researcher here in the audience, Vivek, who his research is human behavior, and I think it's in the context of environment. So do you want to actually add to this, to
very interesting. Thanks, Jenny, for bringing me into this conversation. So I was listening very intently to what you said, Praveen. And it's it probably reflects some sort of frustration, right, that we have seen, and I can totally relate to that. But if I were to try and step back, how do we behave, right? I think you are saying that, pretty much all our problems are due to our behavior, whether as individuals or as families or as companies. Like Ravi said, corporation by default is, greed, right? Greed in a polite way, right? We are all driven by financial outcomes like profits. So I think if you look at public policy or government, I wouldn't go to the extreme of, we don't need the government or government policies, because how is our behavior shaped, or what are our, actions based on? Policy is a big structural force, very, very big structural force. And if we don't want to use that, I think it's a societal failure. Just because it has failed doesn't mean it will always fail, right? Just because it has been, say, technically or practically difficult to reduce consumption or to, reduce or to increase recycling. In fact, now you probably know there is a new R that got added, right? Which is, there are many variations, but the one I really like is refuse. Don't use it at all in the first place if you don't need it. Rather than saying reduce, refuse. I don't need this plastic water bottle or whatever it is. So I feel all outcome on the behavior side is a multiplication of structure and agency. You're talking about agency, which I really, really think is important. But policy is about structure. It's about the constraints, it's about the price. It's about, say carbon tax, or it's about, so many things, infrastructure. We can't create infrastructure individually, right? I can't increase number of buses. If we don't rely on government, how else are we going to have buses or metro or anything? So government has a very, very important role. And I think we should do both.
Thank you, Vivek. That was...
You shouldn't let me hold the mic for long. I'll go on and on.
Yeah, human behavior is actually, it's a subject that I too also can go on and on about.
I just want to add one thing to it. And I've seen this, most of Nike's consumers are people in the US and Europe. And everybody talks about recycling and sustainability there. But when we put out product which is 5% more expensive because of using sustainable materials, the sales tanked. So while on one side people kind of talk about sustainability, when it comes to their own life, they are driven by what is the best for them from a financial point of view.
But then isn't that a function also of then policy can come in and incentivize using certain materials, doing certain processes so that you can keep the price at par, no?
Yeah,
because...
So that's where I was saying that the government has to intervene. In fact, if you look at the biggest successes in the world, eradication of disease, for instance, polio, would never have happened without government interference. No? Those are the things I am kind of inspired by, while we'll see that the government has not done its work in lots of cases. Whenever it's worked, it is actually done. And I think sustainability is one area where, frankly, having worked in a large corporation like Nike, they will not move unless somebody puts a gun on their head.
You want to take it?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with sort of everything that all three of you said. And there's, I think, a quote from either Danny Kahneman or someone like that, which says, incentives drive behavior, right? And so Ravi said, like corporations are greedy. But I would extend that to say, well, even people are selfish, in the sense that there's a very small fraction of people who will pay up for a sustainable alternative, right? I mean, it's wonderful that you all are here, but really it's a small minority, right? And we I wish there were many more people, right? Half of Bangalore was here, but we don't have that. And so because people won't spend on the sustainable option out of the goodness of their heart, you need a combination of, in my mind, sort of three things, and it's sort of like the spiral. Improvements in sort of the sort of product landscape happens partly through a combination of technological innovation, which feeds products, and then the product adoption often needs public policy in some cases. So what I noticed in both of their presentations was that there was an emphasis on cost, and showing that this is, in terms of pure cost, this is better than the alternative, right? And that, now in some cases you can get there naturally. You can get there by cleverer design, choice of materials, choice of processes, and so on. In other cases, you cannot. And that's where public policy is useful. So the two or three big examples that I can give you off the top of my head, one is the adoption of LED lamps, right? So LED technology had to be improved to a certain point where you could turn them into a product, but then the products were still a bit expensive. And if I'm not wrong, I think 10 or 12 years ago, there is a government entity called EESL, which put out a large tender for lots of lamps, LED lamps, that had to be replaced in government buildings, which led to the initial sort of people trying to build LED lamps at scale. And then somewhat similar things have happened on solar, where solar, because of energy buyback and so on, the government is encouraging people to put up solar panels on residential rooftops, commercial rooftops. And now the same thing is happening with electric vehicle adoption, where there are subsidies for the consumer, right? Lower GST, lower road tax. There are subsidies for manufacturers. And because otherwise it would be very hard to get to cost parity, it would take that much longer, right? So you're right that ideally we shouldn't depend on the government. And if you can achieve these things without government intervention, that's wonderful. But where necessary, it's useful for the government to come in and drive collective change in behavior in a way that people individually would never do.
Yeah, if you look at actually even the entire, what happened in the last couple of years in Europe, where they've said that spare parts have to be made for 25 years. There has to be the policy of repair, which has come with actually policy change that and 25 years is a long time, yeah. And sadly we have lost that repair culture. I mean, we used to, even this, yeah, there was, we had a jugaad culture 25 years ago where we had people repairing right from your cobbler on the street to, repairing radios and fridges. You don't find anyone to do that now. So
in many ways, I think it goes down to the economics, the unit economics,
yes,
right? What is the cost of making a new shoe versus the cost of the per hour cost of the cobbler, right? When we were a poor country, the cobbler was not making a lot of money, and therefore, on the other hand, making a shoe was much more expensive. Now, I don't know what fraction, but some large fraction of shoes must be coming from China. Yeah. And that, because of mass manufacturing, it's driving down the cost to a point where for the cobbler's sustenance, he has to charge you some number of rupees per hour, and it's not worth for you to pay that. It's much better for you to just buy some cheap Chinese shoe.
Yeah, but to incentivize Plato to then take back shoes and recycle, that's where policy comes in as well. So
yeah, in fact, Kriti is here, and a number of times we've spoken about, hey, can we do something with that green box that is next to our house where a cobbler sits and repairs shoes. maybe, and I spend a lot of time looking at YouTube videos on how shoes are fixed. And at some point we want to get to that green box and facilitate that. But the other thing I want to kind of go back into is, we kind of belittle the role of government in lots of things. But in innovation, I have seen, especially in material science and areas like sustainability. During my time in the US, I was a part of the National Science Foundation, and I used to kind of help look at new ideas that came in. It is an $8 billion government venture fund that always funds things that other venture capitalists won't touch. And many of the things that you see today, for example, the internet has come out of that. A lot of crazy material science ideas are all coming out of the NSF funding. So there is a role for government in places where private capital won't touch it. And I think, it just adds to this whole policy framework that they will interfere and make it a little better. I'm not speaking of government interference in a lot of things, and it doesn't work in many cases, but I haven't found a better way to kind of push things which otherwise private enterprises won't do.
No, and it is mindset as well. No, I wanted to actually close with all of you. We're all four of us in today what you could call a marginal. We're doing, we are in the margins trying to push certain kinds of products, certain kinds of thinking. What do you think is a way forward where this will at some point, I don't know, next 25 years become mainstream? What do you think needs to be done? Praveen wants to go first.
We had a very unique problem. We don't have enough plastic. Because if you take all of the plastic that's there in India, it will make 2.5 lakh homes.
It's a collection.
No, I'm saying if you collect 100% of the plastic that's now thrown into the market, we will be able to make 2.5 lakh homes. The government right now requires 3 crore homes. Right? Just as an initiative. So we say, oh wow, we have to collect now the plastic, and how do we do that? So we went back to asking, so how do we get this plastic? So how do we change this behavior? And then we stumbled upon something. And I'm answering your question from a point of view and saying that sustainability, we feel, cannot be looked at a city-wide scale. It has to be looked in small pockets. We have to make small clusters and measure everything there inside of that cluster. And then make sure that plastic, waste, anything of that sort is produced and consumed and reused inside of that cluster. And it is now about a matter of engineering, it's a matter of products, it's a matter of all these things. And to master that cluster in such a fashion that you can now create McDonald's and then start replicating them. But if we are trying to do something from the top and then make a policy, then make an enforcing body that is now going to enforce it, and then depend on the enforcing body's efficiency to go down to all these corporates and keep fining them or belting the cat. We've tried this for some duration of time. So we believe that the way forward is to start to look at breaking these down into clusters and then be able to do that and master it like a McDonald's. Everything, every single aspect of it, digital things. We have a proposal for a new 3 Rs. We call it record, repair, and repurpose. Do that in a small cluster. Record everything. 3 shoes came to a cobbler shop. Mark it and say 3 shoes came, went back out. Plastic, anything of that sort. Repair. Make entrepreneurs in small clusters set up fabulous businesses in which they're able to actually repair. When they come and repair a sofa set, it should be really good. It's a beautiful business in a small cluster. And repurpose, like the way we have done. Take this material and make it into something really highly value adding. Set the benchmark in such a fashion that more and more people come and think on the same lines. But we start doing this in small lots.
Going local is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hyper-local, especially in terms of sustainability. In that area, you can do tree sensors. You can do board sensors. You can do soil sensors. You can do water sensors. And then be able to replicate it as solutions.
I grew up in sort of that world. Okay.
So we have a behavioral scientist here, and from my understanding of the world, unless you make products that solve consumer problems. No, they are not going to come and buy anything for sustainability. You have to give them a good shoe that gives them comfort, that gives them durability. It's a value. Yeah, at a good price. And then you put in sustainability into it because it's the right thing to do. They will buy it. But if it is a sustainable shoe but doesn't solve any problem for them, they will not touch it. And I've realized that it doesn't matter which brand it is, whether you're a sustainable brand, you're Nike or Adidas, they will not touch it. So I think you have to continue to give consumers what they want in terms of making their life a little more better, but do it in a way that is right for the planet.
Pranav?
I think if you take a long view of all of this, I think it has to come down to change of culture. And one way that, just as a story, 2 generations ago, people in India were relatively poor and so on. And so it was considered sort of a sign of wealth or prosperity that you are healthy. Okay? So culturally it was like, okay, well, everyone is skinny, like, oh, this kid is eating a lot of ghee. Look at him, like he's like healthy, right? And that so because nobody else had enough access to ghee. So if you had access to ghee, that was considered a good thing. Now, in 2 generations, we've gotten to a point where you take ghee away from your kids, or maybe you feed them ghee, but you take butter away from the kids and say, okay, fine, like this is enough, right? So fat or sugar or mithai or these things culturally have gone from being a sign of prosperity or as like a desirable thing to have to something that you have to be careful about, right? It's fine, you eat it on Diwali, but don't eat it like 365 days a year. And that's a cultural change. Now the important thing to note is that cultural change happened across generations, right? So I think there is like a Mark Twain or someone had said this quote that sort of like a depressing thing is that people don't change, they just die. And so change happens one funeral at a time, right? And it's sort of depressing to think, but really if you want to drive cultural change, I think you have to start with the next generation. And it comes down to education and not just education about the science of sustainability, but cultural change about what is worth consuming and whether consumption is to be put on a pedestal, right? And so this goes back to the ghee or butter story about, well, is it a good idea to consume and to have eight pairs of shoes? Is it a good idea to have a large home? Is it a good idea to have a big car, right?
Yeah.
But my only submission to you is that it won't happen in 10 years. It'll take 2 generations to happen.
But if you want to make it happen faster, you better raise some incentives.
Yeah.
If there's an incentive, then everybody wants to participate in
You
it.
also have to make it cool.
And that's where I can design when everything else comes in.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience here.
Oh, sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this. So there are 3 variants, starts at 2 lakhs, so 2.5 Yeah, sorry, I might not have mentioned it, but we have 3 variants. The top end variant is 3 lakh, and that has AC in it, and that was something that we didn't think that was that important, but from talking to early customers, so one of the things that we did a lot was to talk through with potential customers all along the journey, and the AC thing came up a lot, and so we said, well, we should have one variant that has AC, and then but we still have one variant that's without AC.
Sorry, thank you. I've gone through these. I've gone through this discussion that we've been having many times in France, the country I've lived for the past 50 years. And there is a saying in French, that it's always the person who's absent who is in fault. He's absent, he can't answer you. So the point I'm coming to is that we spend a lot of time I would say, waste a lot of time always putting the fault on a government, whatever the country is. And ultimately, things take long, they drag, and no one's getting anywhere, or it takes years. My advice to this, out of experience, would be what all the three of you all are doing already, is act yourself. Don't worry about what rules, what government is going to impose or not going to impose. They will, because sooner or later they will realize how late they have been in whatever they are doing. Take the metros, for example, in Bangalore. Take the fast trains in France, the highways and so on. They have been so late in all this that by the time they start building it, it's of no use. And a lot of time is being wasted. So let's just decide what we have to do and move, and that's it. And that's where we will get quicker. I've got one remark to make on you, on what you said in your small car. Thank you very much for that small car, because I've lost my license twice in France for driving very fast. And that small car wouldn't need for a license for anybody. Of course, I managed to get back my license, but at that time I had a powerful car and lost it twice. So I will think.
I can assure you, you wouldn't lose your license driving this thing.
Yeah,
because you just won't be able to go fast enough.
No. In fact, for a small car like that, up to 60 kilometers, a license is not required.
Well, in India it is.
It's
In
India.
But still, you won't lose your license.
The next time I lose my license, I'm going to keep an eye on your small car. Thank you.
Just curious about you talked about change, but quite often change is driven by crisis. It's the reality and the perception of crisis. And so that's something that the three of you could think about. Is there a crisis? Is it getting communicated? And that has often been a huge driver of change.
Is the climate not a crisis?
What I'm saying is
The perception.
The reality and perception of a crisis is often a very important determinant of change.
I think we've not had a bigger crisis actually ever. I think, to me, but the perception of that crisis is. I mean, and if you want to respond to that.
No, I thought a lot about this, and climate is a crisis which is felt largely in the West. In fact, if you come to India and talk to the person who works in my house, for them it's every day is a grind, and for them, this problem of climate is so far away, and there's no instant feedback on this climate crisis, isn't it? You can say that in 40 years your temperature will go up by 1.5 degrees and the ocean is going to rise and it's going to destroy all these cities. They don't have the ability to think that far. For them, the next day is as critical as anything else. When such a large part of the population is living in that world, this idea of crisis is something that just doesn't relate to them. And, like many of us, they also consume. The consequence of consumption is felt on the planet. But, to take the story of climate change to somebody in that community, I think it's going to require a lot of effort. And that is the reality. In fact, having lived in both places, I kind of realize that if I go and talk to anyone about climate, the reception is very, very different.
8 out of 10 blood samples taken during COVID had microplastic in them. And apparently the people in Belgium have the highest amount of microplastic in them simply because they eat mussels. And they do not clean the gut of a fish. It only means that if the fish that we are consuming today still has plastic in them. But it's just that we're removing the gut. That's why we don't have it in us. The crisis is a topic that is true, but is obviously, like you said, is understood only by a few. So the outcome is, like, for example, when we built this Kanyakumari home, we had all these village people from around coming and saying, I want this house. How do I get this? Oh, this hall is much larger, the kitchen is much larger. Oh, it's cooler sitting inside this house, so I want it. So they started taking our paperwork and going and getting bank loans. And something that we were having a conversation was, just because they did it, they're going to save so much of ocean-bound plastic. Now, is that an incentive for them to do so? No. It's just the product is so good that they're just feeling like, okay, so sustainability and the outcome of this thing has to be a part of, let's say the people in this room, who are designing, thinking, trying to put things in place, and then as an effect of your business, which is what you want to do, them just purchasing your product just happens to be a good thing. And then there is scale, and then we could solve a problem. But like you said, it took us 7 years to get our first honeycomb packaging order, even when we were replacing thermocol. And when we did it for Godrej, Adi Godrej himself said, I want to do this, and then it took 2.5 years to convert. And it also converted because we saved them 3.5 crores of rupees per annum. But until then, the fight for 2.5 years was just that they had to pay 1.5 rupees more, and they didn't. So it's not just about us being selfish. Us means a corporate being selfish. A corporate is the sum of all of us as human beings itself, and we are like that. So the way to do it is to just build business models, build products. Design is the first start point. And at the outcome of just people just going out there and casually just buying stuff, which is not really a thought, it should just be better for the planet. That should be the outcome, and the policy makers at the end at least should stop products that are not so. And that would be some, start point, or it should become more expensive or something like that.
To a large extent, to what he also said, we all consume, and we're not going to stop. And if it's going to take us so many more generations to change culture or wait for public policy, the only way to bring change, I think, is, to Praveen's point, integrating it into consumption, integrating sustainability. In fact, that's one of the things that we've kept talking about, saying you make a Gucci shoe for 1,000 euros and say it's net zero carbon footprint. 3 people are going to buy it in the world. But with a 6.5 carbon, Plato's already on 500,000 feet. And it's replaced perhaps another shoe which would have been at 8 or 10 carbon footprint. So we've done it not because it's 6.5, we've done it because, like you said, it's part of their life, it's cool enough for them to wear, it's functionally beneficial, and at the same time, it's got a good carbon footprint. Because you go the other way around and tell them, hey, it's great carbon footprint, it's good for the planet, they may not even have picked it up. But hey, it's a great school shoe, it functionally works for you, it's affordable, and if you bring that in, then at some point you can take it to scale also.
I'll just give you an example. There's a store called Veg Non-Veg somewhere in Indiranagar, I think in the next street. They sell a shoe called Taili, which is basically made from polythene, which is picked off the street. It got a lot of reviews because, Mahindra had funded it and all stuff. In that store, in the last 6 months, they've not sold one piece of that product. It's built on sustainability. 7,500 rupees. So that is the problem I'm talking about. If it doesn't solve a problem for anyone.
It looks like a sneaker. It looks like a sneaker, but it's made from 100% PET recycled bottles and plastic covers. Great story, great innovation. But the common man is not willing to pay 1,500 rupees. Why would he pay 7,500 because it's 100% recycled, right?
The question really is, what percentage of the problem is all this solving?
Yeah.
First of all, what percentage of the problem is all this solving? Yes, Bangalore city produces 1,000 tons of dry waste in one day. How much goes into a shoe? Now there is an incentive as a product itself to be able to make and do this. When we are talking about solving a crisis like this, we need consumption at an immense level. And this is not going to happen by making people conscious. So if you are finding a green entrepreneur who now has got money and is now saying, I'm going to get customers because it's eco-friendly, please tell him not even start that business. Because it doesn't make any sense. No one is going to do that at scale. So today the idea is it's a very fashionable, upmarket, those kind of things that can happen. But if you want to really solve a crisis that we have today, like microplastic is in everyone today. I mean, that's really a crisis. The medical community is grappling around. It's the new pandemic. But it's not just out there. Nobody knows enough about it. It's about the conversation about, hey, we all have to be green, we don't have to throw this, we don't have to do that. It has a limitation to how much it can go. The way forward is to just create amazing products, and that's going to solve it. And some of them are here.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for a last question.
Last question. Actually, I can discuss all of the points, but I'll come to a very practical one to Praveen. I really loved your concept. I think it can, like you're saying, it can be a big sort of change, and I wish you that success. So I have two practical questions. You talked about 3 crore new homes and all. What about the existing homes? Have you looked at retrofitting? Because looks like your product can be put on maybe homes, apartments, etc. As insulation, for instance, and maybe even for that, the evacuation of hot air. So have you looked at retrofit market? That is one question. And a related question is that, the material, I suppose it can serve as insulation, right? So have you looked at insulation market in general? Because, insulation is by itself a huge requirement in construction.
Our patent is actually on a thermally controlled construction material. That means we can control a room's temperature via the walls of a room. So we are able to completely eliminate external heat from coming into the room. Doubling it, we're able to pass air conditioning through the walls and even be able to cool the room. So we are today at a point wherein certainly retrofitting and cladding over the existing buildings certainly significantly drops the energy consumption of a building. But we are at a point wherein we are trying to find engineering applications that are of the highest value, so then we can drive this. Because the fact of the situation is we have lesser plastic than we need. So today the idea is, with how much is available, we do only that much, and as we're able to get access to higher volume of plastic, then we do accordingly. So for now what we have done is we've just done a very wide application, very premium to even low cost, and maybe by next year June we would have zeroed in on exactly what we want to do. But our final objective is to make multi-story buildings. That's our end goal, in where we make completely off-the-grid multi-story buildings. It produces its own water, produces its own food, produces its own power, and it has its own air management system. That means you're able to monitor the air quality inside a building at any point in time.
Okay, maybe we'll take one more question if there is any more questions.
He talked about crisis, and you answered that, in India people are not, sensing it. So largely I agree. Yeah. No. So I think it may be a perception issue also, I feel. In India, there are portions now where people are having much more floods than they had. Your own state of Kerala, right, has changed so much in terms of, the kind of landslides and floodings that used to happen. So I think it's a huge perception issue also when it is more of the same phenomena. When it is like, look at say Sundarbans area or parts of West Bengal and Orissa, and what is happening there now on an annual basis, and compare it what their climate was earlier, the guys there know that there is something happening. They may not relate it to climate change. You may not have related it to climate change, and or maybe to the larger, urbanization that's happened in Kerala and the kind of, growth that has happened in Kerala. But it is actually a crisis. It's not just that the temperature is increasing. There's so many other types of crises. Urbanization or, industrialization are also creating many of these, environmental ecological issues. So we may not have perceived them in India as or even in Bangalore, right? What is happening now, this is not how flooding used to happen earlier, right? It is part of the same system that has become entrenched and is becoming more entrenched right now. We just may not be perceiving it as that we are creating these problems very systematically because of lack of a better design.
The other thing that I found was, sorry, the other thing that's important is the place where consumption happens is not the place where the production happens. So you go to interior China and some of the cities are in shambles, and the things that they produce is not consumed there. It is produced 10,000 miles away, and it's consumed 10,000 miles away by people who have no idea as to what that production is doing. So that's another problem with this.
So one more quick observation about the comment on crisis, right? I feel like the climate crisis as it's unfolding has sort of three characteristics that put together make it roughly the worst thing that we've ever encountered, right? The first thing is we don't understand climate that well, okay? There are like big error bars on every scientific forecast about temperature rise, right? Like whether it's 0.5 degrees or 1.5 or 3.5, like, there are error bars. There are things we don't understand. It's a very complex global system. So that's number one. Number two is it's very slow moving. So it's roughly like sort of frogs boiling in water where you're sort of gently dialing up the temperature. The frogs don't realize that the water is warmer today than it was 10 years ago. And the third problem is that it requires global cooperation, which we are uniquely bad at. We as human beings are not wired to think long term, and we as human beings are not wired to cooperate at the scale of billions, right? The closest analogy to what we have with the crisis, with the climate crisis, was COVID. Okay? Now, COVID was not slow moving. You could feel it. In 3 months, it came to your doorstep. But it did require, we didn't understand it very well, and it did require global cooperation. And we failed miserably at it, right? There was all kinds of blame game happening, right? There was very little global cooperation that happened in understanding COVID. Like, China has never accepted that it originated from Wuhan, for example. And the World Health Organization was shilling for China, and so I don't want to get too political. The point is that this is one level worse than COVID in the sense that it's also slow moving. And so a lot of people are like, well, it'll happen in 40 years from now, like who cares, right? So my submission to you is that we might get to a crisis point if in the next 20 years, one major city in the world goes underwater essentially overnight. That would be a crisis. At that point, you would see like yesterday this city existed, and 10 days later this city is under 10 feet of water, and then people might wake up. My claim is that it's unlikely they will wake up before then.
If I can just respond to 2 points. So the differential in economics that you talked about in terms of what people have reality and perception, there's actually right now a flattening on the information scale. So whether you have a fancy mobile, iPhone 15, or whether you have a regular mobile, it makes no difference. You go anywhere, people are looking at their mobiles. So there's a flattening of information scale, which has made education redundant in certain ways. And the education system hasn't caught up with the idea that they're nowhere and AI will merely accentuate what you already see. So you have an information landscape where people will listen to you in 2 minutes, which, you just go anywhere now. I was on a flight yesterday. I was the only one of I think it's my age group, that I was the only one reading a book. Everybody was sitting there on their mobiles and, with the headphones on it. So I think there's a discrepancy in the economics and the information access, and there's only so much information access that you can. So if you prioritize information in a way of a certain kind, I think you have a reach.
I'm an eternal optimist. I think the next 20 years are going to be some of the most brilliant times of us as the human race. Information has been democratized. People sat on a hill with all the information and then made people come in front of them, and then some guy transferred that. But now it's on our phone, and it's in such a systematic fashion that you have to just ask the right question. So now when it is with everyone, and everyone has the ability to think, I think the way solutions are going to come about is going to be unprecedented as ever in human history. So the way we draw this graph as to saying, hey, the last 25 years has been like this, so thus we take a certain percentage of it and then move it across the scale, I think that scale is tipping in a completely different way altogether, simply because of this access to information to everyone. So I think climate, environment, birds, trees, air, water will all get better.
Like he said,
no, actually, I think it would be nice to end on this positive note. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you, Ravi. But I also want to say a few things for design. I mean, all of you guys are designers, and we have many designers in the audience as well. To me, the responsibility lies also, today we live in 100% design world, whether it's the systems or the things we use. IT is, design still gives us IT. It's all about design. And I think the responsibility that everyone, all designers have is huge, because it's actually also below the surface. It's subliminal. It's unconscious. We are using design things all the time. And this entire thing of materials and processes, I think this responsibility that designers have is something that I hope all of us will sort of... it was nice to actually hear so many points of view, because unlike Praveen, I tend to be sometimes a little pessimistic. So, and I think those also matter, the pessimistic ones. But my pessimism is actually one of my motivations for even organizing Curious Crow, because I feel, listen, we've got to talk about it, But and talk about it we will. I think I think everybody at some point is going to be. It's a long road ahead, but we will get there slowly, with less, with small. and we'll make that cool. Thank you all of you for coming. It's really nice. Thank you. Thank all.